You are on Crazy Karen HOA. Her favorite word was violation, and winter made it easy. You are failing inspection, and I am charging you for it. Joan yelled it over the wind before I even got my car door fully open. My driveway apron was not cleared, she screamed, and she was calling management right now to start fines unless I fixed it before she finished her recording. She held her phone chest high, camera aimed right at me, her red puffer coat hood pulled tight around her face. Black ice shined on the pavement behind her. I had just driven back from a client meeting in Fort Worth, and the last thing I needed was another HOA ambush in my own driveway. I work in medical device sales, which means I am always on the road meeting clients, hospitals, and clinics all over the Dallas-Fort Worth area. My schedule is unpredictable, my hours are long, and the last thing I can afford is HOA drama cutting into my sleep or costing me my job. But here in the Hillcrest Snow Route Association, a development in Arlington, Texas, where the committee micromanages shoveling like it is architecture, Joan Jackson had decided that winter enforcement was her personal crusade. She took 3 steps closer, boots crunching on the thin layer of ice. I decide what counts as cleared, not you. Her voice cut through the wind. She pointed at the narrow strip between my driveway and the street, the apron she kept calling it, and waved her phone like it was a weapon. You have got 30 minutes to fix this, or I am sending the certified letter today. I looked down at the apron. It was clear. I had shoveled it that morning before my 7 a.m. drive to Fort Worth. There was a thin skim of refrozen slush from street spray, but nothing that violated any rule I had ever seen in the bylaws. I told her that. I cleared it this morning. This is runoff from the plow. She shook her head, mouth twisted in a smirk. Not good enough. You let it refreeze. That is a slip hazard, and you are responsible. I am documenting this right now. I felt the knot in my chest tighten. This was not the first time. Joan had been targeting me for weeks, ever since the first big snowstorm hit in early January. She had sent me 2 violation notices for snow pile placement, one for not clearing my walkway within 6 hours of snowfall, and another for leaving a bag of driveway sand near my side gate, which she called clutter. Every notice came with a fine threat. Every notice used the same language about emergency winter protocols and association authority. And every time, I had complied, only for her to find something new. Joan pulled a cheap measuring tape from her coat pocket and knelt down on the apron. She stretched it across the width, then stood up and shook her head. Only 32 inches cleared. Rules say 36 minimum for emergency access. You are 4 inches short. That is a violation. I stared at her. That tape had become her signature prop over the last month. She carried it everywhere, measuring shoveled paths, driveway widths, sidewalk clearances. She had used it on 3 other neighbors that I knew of, always finding something just under the minimum. It was her excuse to escalate. I kept my voice level. Show me the rule that says 36 inches. She tapped her phone screen. It is in the winter emergency addendum. I have it right here. She did not show me. Instead, she turned and started walking toward her own driveway 2 houses down, still talking into her phone camera. Violation recorded. Enforcement proceeding. Fines will be assessed per day until compliance. That was when I made the decision. I stopped arguing and started collecting, because the end game was already set. Joan did not know it yet, but I had been gathering proof for 2 weeks. Payment confirmations proving I was never delinquent despite their winter fee blast. Photos time-stamped from the morning of every snow event showing my driveway cleared. A folder on my phone with every notice she had sent, every email, every text. And most importantly, a third-party inspection report I had quietly commissioned from a certified property compliance inspector 3 days earlier. The report said my property met all local and HOA snow removal standards. It even cited the actual bylaws, which did not mention 36 inches anywhere. But I was not ready to show my hand yet. I needed witnesses. I needed Joan to escalate one more time in front of people who could verify what she was doing. So I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my ally, a contractor named Marcus, who had been working on a neighbor's roof the day Joan interfered with a city plow driver, and told him he was plowing too close to the curbs. Marcus had photos and timestamps from that day. He had already agreed to testify if it came to a hearing. I also texted 2 neighbors who had been standing outside with salt buckets in hand during one of Joan's earlier rants. They had whispered to each other while she measured my walkway, and one of them had given me a look that said they knew this was absurd. I needed them present for what was coming next. Because Joan was not done. I knew her pattern by now. First came the verbal threat. Then came the certified letter. Then came the attempt to force immediate compliance through fear. And if that did not work, she moved to enforcement. The certified letter arrived 2 days later. It was waiting in my mailbox when I got home from a client meeting in Plano. The envelope was thin, official-looking, and marked with the Hillcrest Snow Route Association return address. Inside was a single page demanding $300 in fines for failure to maintain emergency access standards during a winter weather event. It referenced the 36-inch rule. It referenced my refusal to comply. It referenced Section 4.7 of the Emergency Winter Protocol Addendum, which I had never seen, and which did not exist in the bylaws I had received when I bought the house. The letter gave me 72 hours to pay or face additional penalties, including possible towing of any vehicle parked in violation of snow clearance zones. That last part was new. Towing. Joan had never mentioned towing before. I sat in my car and read the letter twice. Then I took a photo of it, front and back, and added it to my evidence folder. The letter was dated 3 days earlier, but it had only just arrived because of weather delays. Joan was treating the late delivery like it was my choice, my failure to act. I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. Joan just sent me a towing threat. He laughed, but it was not a happy sound. She is going full scorched earth. You need to get that inspector report in front of someone official before she actually calls a tow truck. I know, but I need her to try it first. I need her to commit. Marcus was quiet for a second. You are playing chicken with a tow truck? I am playing chicken with Joan's credibility. If she calls a tow truck without proper authorization, that is harassment. That is abuse of HOA authority. And that is when I hit her with the report and the rest of the evidence. He exhaled. All right. But you better have witnesses when it goes down. I will. I already texted the neighbors. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine idling in the street. I looked out my window and saw a tow truck parked 2 houses down, yellow lights flashing. Joan was standing next to it, waving her arms and pointing toward my driveway. She was wearing the same red puffer coat, hood up, and she had her phone in one hand and that measuring tape in the other. I pulled on my coat and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a wall. My breath fogged in the air. Joan saw me and started walking toward my driveway, the tow truck driver following a few steps behind. He was a big guy in a work jacket, and he looked uncomfortable. Joan stopped at the edge of my apron and pointed at my car. This vehicle is parked in a snow clearance zone that does not meet compliance standards. I am authorizing removal under emergency winter protocols. The tow truck driver looked at me, then back at Joan. He shifted his weight. "Ma'am, I need to see the authorization paperwork. I cannot tow without a signed request and proof of violation." Joan waved her phone. "I am the HOA president. I am giving you verbal authorization right now." The driver shook his head. "That is not how it works. I need a signed form from the management company or the board. Verbal does not cut it." Joan's face went red. She stepped closer to him, voice rising. "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." The driver took a step back. "No, ma'am, that is not how it works. I am not hooking up a car without proper paperwork. If you want me to tow, you need to get me the signed authorization." I watched Joan's expression twist. She turned to me, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You think you can get away with this? You think you can ignore the rules and I will just let it slide?" I kept my voice calm. "I am not ignoring any rules. My driveway is clear. My car is legally parked. And you do not have authorization to tow." She pulled out her phone and started recording again. "I am documenting your refusal to comply. This is going in the file. You will be hearing from our attorney." The tow truck driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I am leaving. Call me back when you have the paperwork." He turned and walked back to his truck. Joan yelled after him, but he ignored her. The engine revved, and the truck pulled away, leaving Joan standing in the street with her phone still raised. That was the moment I knew I had her. A tow vendor refusing to act without proper authorization. It was exactly the kind of thing that would look terrible in a hearing or a settlement discussion. Joan had just tried to abuse her authority in front of a third party who refused to go along with it. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Marcus and the two neighbors. "Joan just tried to tow my car without authorization. Driver refused. I need you all to be ready to testify." Marcus replied within seconds. "On it." One of the neighbors, a woman named Carla, who lived 3 doors down, texted back. "I saw the whole thing from my window. I will back you up." The other neighbor, an older man named Ed, sent a thumbs-up emoji. Joan was still standing in the street, phone in hand, when I walked back inside. I did not say anything else to her. There was no point. She had crossed the line, and now it was just a matter of documenting the fallout. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more wild HOA drama where karma always finds a way. Over the next 2 days, Joan went into overdrive. She started going door to door with a clipboard, trying to recruit complaints about me like it was a campaign. I watched from my window as she knocked on 6 different doors, talking fast and gesturing toward my house. Most people listened politely and closed the door. A few nodded along. One person, a younger guy who had just moved in, actually signed something on her clipboard. She also sent out an email blast to the entire neighborhood, which I only found out about because Carla forwarded it to me. The email was titled Compliance Reminder and Snow Safety Update. It did not mention me by name, but it referenced a homeowner in violation of emergency winter protocols who was refusing to cooperate with enforcement efforts. It urged neighbors to report any similar violations and reminded everyone that winter safety was a shared responsibility. The email also announced an emergency board meeting scheduled for the following week to discuss potential policy updates and enforcement measures. Joan was setting the stage for a public showdown, and she was doing it in front of the entire neighborhood. I forwarded the email to Marcus. She is trying to turn this into a referendum on me. Marcus called me back immediately. She is digging her own grave. You have got the inspector report, the payment records, the photos. Let her keep escalating. The more she does, the worse it looks when you drop the evidence. I know, but I need to get ahead of the meeting. If she controls the narrative in front of the board, it does not matter what proof I have. She will spin it. Then you need to file a formal complaint before the meeting. Get your evidence on the record first. That was the plan. I spent the next day drafting a formal complaint to the HOA management company. I attached the inspector report, the payment confirmations, the time-stamped photos, and a written timeline of every interaction with Joan, including the tow truck incident. I also included witness statements from Marcus, Carla, and Ed. The complaint accused Joan of harassment, abuse of authority, and selective enforcement. It requested a full review of the winter emergency protocols and a formal hearing to address the violations. I sent the complaint via certified mail and email to the management company, copying the entire HOA board. Then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. 2 days later, I received a call from the management company representative, a woman named Linda who sounded tired and professional. She told me they had received my complaint and were taking it seriously. She also told me that Joan had filed a counter-complaint accusing me of harassment and obstruction. Linda scheduled a meeting at the city municipal building for the following Monday. She said it would be a neutral space where both sides could present their case. She also said that a city compliance officer would be present to verify the actual code requirements. I thanked her and hung up. Then I texted Marcus. Meeting is set. Monday at the city building. City compliance officer will be there. Marcus sent back a fire emoji. This is it. The weekend before the meeting, I spent hours organizing my evidence folder. I printed everything. The inspector report, the payment confirmations, the photos, the email blast, the violation notices, the towing incident timeline. I put it all in a clean 3-ring binder with labeled tabs. It looked professional, thorough, and impossible to dismiss. I also prepped my talking points. I was not going to rant. I was not going to attack Joan personally. I was going to stay calm, cite facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. On Monday morning, I drove to the city municipal building in downtown Arlington. It was a gray concrete structure with a parking lot full of salt-stained cars. Inside, the lobby smelled like old coffee and floor cleaner. Linda met me at the front desk and led me to a small conference room on the second floor. Joan was already there, sitting at the far end of the table with her own folder and that same red puffer coat draped over the back of her chair. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression was pure ice. The city compliance officer was a middle-aged man in a polo shirt with a city badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself as Officer Martinez and sat at the head of the table with a clipboard. Linda sat next to him, laptop open. Martinez started the meeting by outlining the process. This is an informal hearing to address a dispute between a homeowner and the HOA regarding winter maintenance compliance. Both parties will have a chance to present their case. I will verify code compliance and provide a recommendation. The management company will make the final decision on any penalties or policy changes. Joan went first. She stood up, opened her folder, and launched into a prepared statement about the importance of winter safety and emergency access. She talked about the snowstorms in January, the risk of ice injuries, the need for strict enforcement. She held up photos of my driveway, pointing at the thin layer of her frozen slush on the apron. She referenced the 36-inch rule and Section 4.7 of the Emergency Winter Protocol Addendum. She also pulled out her measuring tape and demonstrated how she had verified the clearance width. She said I had refused to comply with multiple notices. She said I had obstructed enforcement efforts. She said I was creating a liability risk for the entire neighborhood. When she finished, she sat down and folded her arms. Martinez wrote something on his clipboard. Linda typed on her laptop. Then it was my turn. I stood up, placed my binder on the table, and opened it to the first tab. I started with the inspector report. I handed a copy to Martinez and another to Linda. This is a third-party inspection report from a certified property compliance inspector. It was conducted on my property 3 days before the tow truck incident. It verifies that my driveway, walkway, and apron meet all local and HOA snow removal standards. Martinez flipped through the report, nodding. Joan shifted in her chair. I continued. I also have payment confirmations proving I was never delinquent on any HOA fees, despite receiving notices that suggested otherwise. I turned to the second tab and handed over the printed confirmations. I have time-stamped photos showing my property cleared on the morning of every snow event this winter. I turned to the third tab and handed over the photos. And I have witness statements from 3 neighbors and a contractor verifying that the HOA president attempted to tow my vehicle without proper authorization, which the tow truck driver refused to do. I turned to the fourth tab and handed over the statements. Martinez read them carefully. Linda leaned over to look. I took a breath. I also need to address the 36-inch rule that has been referenced multiple times. I turned to the fifth tab, which contained a printed copy of the official HOA bylaws. Section 4.7 of the Emergency Winter Protocol Addendum does not exist in the bylaws. The actual snow removal requirements are outlined in Section 3.2, which states that driveways and walkways must be cleared to a reasonable width for safe passage. There is no minimum measurement specified. Joan's face went pale. Martinez looked up from the bylaws. Can you show me where the 36-inch rule is referenced in the official documents? Joan opened her folder, flipping through pages. It is in the addendum. I have it here. Martinez held out his hand. Can I see it? Joan handed him a printed sheet. Martinez read it, frowned, and handed it to Linda. This is not an official HOA document. It is not signed, not dated, and not filed with the management company. Linda looked at Joan. Did you draft this yourself? Joan hesitated. The board discussed it. We agreed on stricter standards for winter emergencies. Martinez set the sheet down. But it was never formally adopted or distributed to homeowners. Joan did not answer. I leaned forward. I also need to address something else. I have a copy of the HOA dues ledger, which I obtained through a formal records request last week. It shows that the HOA president, Joan Jackson, is currently 3 months behind on her own dues. Joan's head snapped up. That is private information. Linda cut in. It is not private if it was provided through a formal records request. She turned to Joan. Is this accurate? Joan looked at the table. I had some cash flow issues. I have been working with the treasurer. Martinez closed his folder. I have seen enough. Based on the inspector report and the photographic evidence, the homeowner is in full compliance with local and HOA snow removal requirements. The 36-inch rule does not appear in the official bylaws and was not formally adopted. The towing attempt was unauthorized and inappropriate. I recommend that all fines be reversed and that the HOA review its enforcement procedures. Linda nodded. I agree. I will be recommending to the board that all penalties be dropped and that a formal policy review be conducted. I will also be recommending that the board consider whether the current leadership structure is serving the best interests of the community. Joan stood up abruptly, grabbing her folder. This is ridiculous. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. Martinez looked at her. You were selectively enforcing rules that do not exist while failing to meet your own financial obligations to the association. That is not protection. That is abuse of authority. Joan stormed out of the room without another word. The door slammed behind her. Linda turned to me. I will send you a formal letter within the week confirming the reversal of all fines and outlining the next steps. I apologize for the inconvenience and the harassment you have experienced. I thanked her, shook hands with Martinez, and left the building. Outside, the cold air felt clean. I texted Marcus. It is done. All fines reversed. Joan is out of credibility. Marcus called me immediately. Did you really hit her with the dues ledger? I did. He laughed. That is brutal. That is perfect. Over the next 2 weeks, the fallout was swift. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Joan from the president position. The minutes recorded the reversal of all winter enforcement penalties and the reason, citing abuse of authority and selective enforcement. Joan's credibility collapsed in front of witnesses, and 3 other homeowners came forward with their own complaints about her tactics. The management company issued a settlement that included full fee refunds for everyone who had been targeted under the fake 36-inch rule, a no-contact directive between Joan and the affected homeowners, and a written ban on retaliatory winter enforcement with penalties for violations. Joan resigned from the board entirely 2 days after the settlement was finalized. I heard through Carla that she was looking to sell her house and move to another neighborhood. I never saw her with that measuring tape again. The funny karma moment came a week later when I ran into the tow truck driver at a gas station. He recognized me and walked over. Hey, you were the guy from Hillcrest, right? I nodded. He grinned. That HOA lady called me again last week, tried to get me to tow someone else. I told her I would not work for that association anymore unless everything went through the management company in writing. She hung up on me. I laughed. A tow vendor refusing to act without proper authorization. Joan had tried to flex her power and ended up burning her own enforcement bridge. The neighborhood settled back into a quieter rhythm after that. The new board president was a retired engineer named Tom, who immediately revised the winter protocols to match the actual bylaws and eliminated all the made-up rules. He also instituted a formal complaint process with oversight from the management company. I kept my evidence binder in my office, just in case, but I never needed it again. Marcus and I stayed in touch. He told me that 2 other neighbors had approached him about similar issues with Joan over the years, and my case had given them the confidence to come forward. The board was now reviewing all enforcement actions from the previous 2 years to identify patterns of abuse. Carla and Ed became regular allies. We started a neighborhood group chat to share updates and keep each other informed. It was not revolutionary, but it was a small check on HOA overreach. Winter eventually gave way to spring. The snow melted, the ice disappeared, and the neighborhood looked normal again. But the lesson stayed. I learned that documentation is everything. I learned that witnesses matter. I learned that sometimes the best response to an abusive HOA is not to fight back with anger, but to let them overreach and hang themselves with their own words. Joan had said it herself early on. We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works. Except, it did not work. The tow vendor refused. The city compliance officer refused. The management company refused. And in the end, her own boomerang line came back to destroy her credibility in front of the people who mattered most. I still drive past her old house sometimes. There is a for sale sign in the yard now. I do not feel sorry for her. She chose to weaponize her authority. She chose to target people with fake rules and intimidation. She chose to ignore her own obligations while demanding everyone else meet impossible standards. And when it all fell apart, the minutes recorded the reversal and the reason. Karen's credibility collapsed in front of witnesses. A tow vendor refused to act without proper authorization. And the funny karma beat, the one that still makes me smile, is that Karen tried to flex authority, and the policy said she could not. I still work in medical device sales. I still drive all over the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I still come home tired after long client meetings. But now, when I pull into my driveway, I do not have to worry about someone standing there with a measuring tape and a fake rulebook. The Hillcrest Snow Route Association is still here, but it is different now. The board meetings are transparent. The enforcement is fair. The rules are real. And me? I keep my evidence folder updated, my allies close, and my receipts organized. Because in an HOA neighborhood, the best defense is a good paper trail. Until next time, take care and stay safe out there.